Church, let me tell you a story. You may have heard parts of it before, but I want you to really try and imagine it and put yourself in it this time. Imagine you're living in a place you love. It's familiar, it's safe, you know the streets, the people, the sounds of home. Then one day, everything changes. You wake up to chaos. Your city is under attack. People are screaming, families are being torn apart. The places that held your memories, your schools, your favourite market, your favourite coffee shop, your sports team are being destroyed. And before you even have time to process it, you are taken, forced to leave, dragged away to a place that is nothing like home. This isn't just any place. It's the heart of the enemy's empire, a place where they speak a different language, worship different gods, and live by a completely different set of rules. You don't get a choice. You don't get to say goodbye. You just go. This is what happened to the people of Judah when Babylon invaded. But here's the crazy part. Despite all the chaos, all the destruction, God was still in control. Even in exile, even in Babylon, God was still at work. And because we have the benefit of looking back across history, we see something incredible. God brings good things out of bad places. God brings good things out of bad places. Now, have you ever had one of those moments? Are you in one of those moments right now, where life takes an unexpected turn, where your plans fall apart, where everything seems to be falling apart, and you wonder how you ended up here in a place you never wanted to be? Maybe for you it wasn't a physical exile like the people of Judah experienced, but it sure felt like it. Maybe it was a sudden job loss, painful breakup you never saw coming, a betrayal by someone you trusted, a dream that fell apart, or even a health crisis. Something that turned your world completely and utterly upside down. And now you find yourself in a situation you never asked for, wondering how you got here, why you are here, and what is happening. One moment, life is predictable, comfortable even, and then just like that you find yourself in unfamiliar territory, feeling lost and alone. We all have these moments, Babylon moments, seasons of life where we feel displaced, where nothing looks like what we expected. And maybe for you it's not just one moment, but a whole season of waiting, of uncertainty, of feeling like you don't belong, feeling disconnected, hurt, frustrated, struggling. Maybe you've prayed for God to change your situation, to fix what's broken, but it feels like He's silent. And if we're honest, in these moments, it's easy to ask, God, where are you? But what if, just like in Jeremiah 24, God is actually using this difficult season for something greater? What if this isn't just a detour, but part of the plan? What if the very thing that feels like a setback is actually setting you up for something better? Think about a seed. When it's planted, it's buried in darkness. If you didn't know any better, you might think it was dead. But give it time, because in that hidden place, something is happening. New life is forming, growth is taking place, and one day that seed will push through the soil and become something beautiful. Maybe you feel buried right now. Maybe you feel like life has covered you in darkness, in soil, in manure. But here's the truth. God is still working. The exile wasn't the end for the people of Judah, and your hard season isn't the end for you either, because God brings good things out of bad places. And I know that That can be hard to hear when you're in the middle of it. When you can't see the light, when there's no end to the darkness, when everything feels miserable and you just want to give up. But bad places don't mean God has abandoned us. Difficult times don't mean God has vanished. Sometimes they're where God does his best work. Because God brings good things out of bad places. And as we look at our passage today, that's what we're going to talk about, how in the darkest places, in the turmoil, in the suffering and confusion and pain, God brings good things out of bad places. So let's see what God has to say. Now, imagine walking into the temple that we heard in our passage this morning, walking into the temple courtyard and seeing 2 baskets of figs sitting in front of God's house. One basket is full of ripe, delicious figs, the kind you'd love to eat. The other basket, rotten, stinky, mouldy figs, completely inedible. That's exactly what Jeremiah is seeing in his vision. But before we unpack that, let's just step back and see how we got here in the first place. Jeremiah had been warning the people of Judah for decades. He told them that if they kept turning away from God, worshipping false gods, ignoring his commands, disaster would come. But they didn't listen. Eventually, Babylon, the most powerful empire of the time, swept in, conquered Jerusalem, and took many people into exile. It seemed like a helpless situation. The nation of Judah is falling apart. Now, 2 kings are mentioned here, Jehoiakim and Zedekiah. Jehoiakim is a young king. He's only 18 years old. He'd been ruling for a grand total of 3 months when this happened, when he surrenders to Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon. And as a result, he and thousands of others, leaders, skilled workers, and soldiers were taken into exile in Babylon. It seemed like the worst possible thing that could happen. Meanwhile, back in Jerusalem, Nebuchadnezzar appoints Zedekiah as a puppet king. Zedekiah is Jehoiakim's uncle. He was weak-willed and fearful. So Zedekiah and those who remained in Judah believed they had escaped the worst, but in reality they were teetering on the edge of complete destruction. Instead of trusting God, Zedekiah wavered between rebellion against Babylon and false alliances with Egypt. He refused to humble himself and listen to the warnings of Jeremiah. So the political climate was tense and fear filled the streets of Jerusalem. The temple, it still stood, but its treasures had been looted. The city walls still stood, but they would soon fall. Those left behind, Zedekiah, his officials and the poor, who weren't taken, they clung to this illusion that they were safe simply because they were still in the land. They thought God wouldn't allow his holy city to be destroyed. But they were mistaken. Their rebellion, idolatry, and refusal to trust in God would soon bring ruin upon them. By contrast, the exiles in Babylon were devastated. They had lost everything, their homes, their freedom, their temple. They had every reason to believe that God had abandoned them. Yet, through Jeremiah, God was about to show them a different perspective. What seemed like a curse would actually be the very thing that would save them, because God was bringing good things out of bad places. Now, here's where things get interesting. God explains the vision. The good figs represent the exiles, yes, the ones taken away from their homes and forced into a foreign land. And the bad figs, they represent the people left behind, including King Zedekiah and his officials. And that sounds weird, doesn't it? Shouldn't it be the other way around? Wouldn't it make more sense that the people who stayed in the homeland were the good ones, and the ones dragged off into captivity were the bad ones? That's what we might expect, but God flips our expectations. The exiles, the ones who lost everything, are actually the ones God is going to bless. From a human perspective, exile looked like a punishment, but from God's perspective, it was an opportunity for renewal. The exiles would be stripped of all their comforts and forced to deal with their need for God. It was in this place of brokenness that they would rediscover their identity as God's people. On the other hand, those who remained in Jerusalem thought that they had been spared. They assumed they were safe because they still had their city, their routines, their positions of power. But in reality, they were like the rotten figs, spoiled and unusable. They were the ones who refused to listen to God, and their false sense of security would lead to their downfall. Why? Because God brings good things out of bad places. Now, God tells the exiles, I will watch over them for their good. I will bring them back. I will build them up. I will give them a heart to know me. Now, think about that. They were in a place they never wanted to be. Yet that's where God was going to bless them. He was disciplining them, but he was also preparing them. In Babylon, they would learn to rely on him like never before. They would turn away from idols and rediscover what it meant to be God's people. See, painful situations have a way of getting our attention. When life is easy, we don't always see our need for God. But when everything is stripped away, our comfort, our plans, our control, that's when we often experience the deepest spiritual growth. The exiles had learned this firsthand. In Babylon, without their familiar surroundings, they had to ask, who are we really and who is our God? This was a refining process. God wasn't just preserving them, he was transforming them. He wanted them to come back to him with renewed hearts, not just restored land. He wanted them to know him personally, not just perform religious rites. Now, on the other hand, those who stayed behind, those who thought they were safe, they were actually in danger. Their false security kept them from turning back to God, and eventually destruction came. These bad figs, the people who clung to their own way rather than God's way, refused to be changed, and as a result, they faced ruin. Okay, so what does that mean for us? Well, sometimes the places we think are bad is actually where God is working for our good. Maybe you've been through a tough season, failure, disappointment, situation you never wanted. But what if God is using it to grow you? What if, like the exiles, he's drawing you closer to him? It's easy to think that if something is difficult, it must be wrong. But in reality, some of the best things God does in our lives happen in the hardest places. God's plan often includes pain, but never without purpose. He doesn't waste our struggles. Instead, he uses them to shape us, to draw us near, and to teach us to rely on him. We may not always see what he's doing, but we can trust that he is faithful. The exiles couldn't see the bigger picture while they were in Babylon, but God was still working. The same is true for us. No matter what season we're in, God is always working for our good. Now, through this vision, God makes it abundantly clear. He's not done with his people. Even in exile, even in hardship, even when all seems lost, he is still faithful. And in verses 6 and 7, he gives 4 powerful promises to the exiles. 1, I will bring them back to this land. God's discipline was not about destruction. It was about restoration. The exile wasn't permanent. It was a season of refining. In the same way, whatever hardship we face is never the end of the story. God is a God of restoration, and he is always leading his people toward renewal. Number 2, God will build them up and not tear them down. The exile looked like a breaking down moment. But God was actually building something better, stronger faith, deeper dependence, true transformation. Sometimes God allows things to be stripped away not to harm us, but to rebuild us into something better. Number 3, God is going to plant them and not uproot them. God wasn't just about temporary fixes. He was planting his people for a future that would last even when things feel unstable. God promises stability. When we trust him, he establishes us in ways that endure. Number 4, God was going to give them a heart to know him. More than anything, God's desire was and is relationship. He wanted his people to know him, to trust him, to walk with him, and that's his desire for us too. No matter the season we're in, whether it feels like exile or restoration, God is faithful. He brings good things out of bad places, always. So, what do we do with this? If you're in a tough spot, if a bad place right now, how do you move forward? Well, first off, trust that God is still watching over you. Even when everything feels out of control, know that he hasn't taken his eyes off you. He sees you, he knows you, and he cares for you. Next, look for the good God is building in your life. Even when things seem broken, ask yourself, what might God be teaching me in this moment? This isn't just about surviving, but about growing through the struggle. Further, draw close to God. One of the biggest mistakes the people in Judah made was ignoring God during the trials. But the exiles learned to seek him. They grew closer to God in their hardship through prayer, his word, fellowship, and service. And lastly, choose to believe that good things can come out of tough places. Even if you can't see it right now, trust that God has a plan. Remember, he is with you. So, a challenge for you. Take a moment today. Write down one way God might be working in your current situation. One way. Even if it's hard to see, ask him to show you and write down one way God might be working in your current situation. Whether it is good or bad, one way God might be working. Now, before we close, I want you to imagine what it would be like if we truly lived this out. Imagine if instead of despairing in hard times, we looked for where God was at work. What if we really believed that no situation is beyond redemption? Think about the stories in the Bible. Joseph went from prison to a palace. Daniel went from exile to influence. Paul wrote some of his most powerful letters while he was in chains. And of course, Jesus, who suffered the ultimate bad place, the cross. And it brought the greatest good the world has and will ever know. So what if your hardest season is actually the setup for something greater? Even though it feels like you're stuck in a hopeless situation, what if God isn't done with you? I know it might hurt right now, but what if the thing you're going through right now is the very thing God is using to shape your future, to grow you into something more, to prepare you for something better, to use you for something greater? What if this strained relationship, this difficult work environment, this financial challenge, this disappointment, this constant pressure, health concern, this loss, what if it is something God is using to bring good into your life? What if this struggle, this difficulty, this pain is something that God is using? Church, if you're in a tough spot, don't lose hope. Look for him. He's there. And he's not done yet. Remember, God brings good things out of bad places. God brings good things out of bad places.